Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about navigating the twists and turns of life and embracing the imperfections of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches Catherine and Kirsty, and our mission is to support you in finding your own path, your own way, with greater clarity and self trust, no matter how messy or uncertain things may seem.
We address the roadblocks that come up time and time again for our coaching clients, from acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
As well as asking lots of questions, a coach's favourite thing to do, we'll be sharing thoughts and insights and offering plenty of tips, tools, and techniques for you to try.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. So, following on from our If It Works for You, It Works, we wanted to do another coaching bite-size episode, our tools, tips and techniques, which we're going to have to get used to saying that, Kirsty, so it trips off the tongue, all those T's. But yes, we wanted to follow this one up as well with those 3 T's. And Kirsty, I'm going to hand over to you because this was your idea.
Oh, no pressure then. Right.
Yeah, sorry. Here we go. All over to you. I'm just going to sit here and enjoy what you say.
Okay, enjoy your cup of tea and your biscuit, and
Yeah.
I'll witter aimlessly for a bit. And interrupt me when it gets too much, okay?
Okay.
We've got a deal. So, tips, tools, and techniques around if it works for you. So, the idea behind this episode is to provide some of the 3 T's to help you to recognize what matters to you, to follow your own path rather than allowing others' views to divert you, and to avoid creating dependence on external things to create the change you want to in your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Because I think those were, the If It Works for You, It Works episode, arguably a little bit airy-fairy, but there's some really concrete stuff in there about how we're behaving and how we're allowing our thoughts and feelings to sort of control us, I guess, maybe
Yeah,
unconsciously.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's actually at the heart of quite a lot of the stuff we talk about. And those things that you just said about, I'm sure they crop up in a lot of the episodes we talk about, knowing what matters to you, staying in your own lane. I'm thinking, comparisons, we've spoken about that before. There's
Mm.
sort of interconnectivity, isn't there, between so many of
Yeah.
the things that we talk about. And you can get it does feel like you've been blown off path sometimes. And you think, hang on a minute, where am I? What am I doing? Which path am I supposed to be on?
Absolutely. Yes, this is how I feel our episodes usually work. I witter a little bit inanely, then you interrupt and talk sense. And I think that this works beautifully. Thank you.
See, I feel it's the other way around. It's interesting.
Well, as long as we both feel it works,
Yeah. Yeah, well, it
all is
works for
well,
us,
right?
clearly. Yes, all is good.
Okay, so the first point that I mentioned there was around recognizing what really matters to you. And that brings us to our values identification. Again, we've done previous episodes on values. We'll reference those in the show notes and do have a listen because it's a really important area of life. And it might sound quite obvious because we probably all have quite a strong sense of what matters to us, but it's often not very specific or conscious. I think many of us would go, yeah, I know what matters. But then when asked to sort of put it into words and really get clear on it, it might not feel quite so easy, or it might open up more debate internally. So being consciously aware of our core values really helps us to make the decisions that feel right for us instead of choosing whatever's going to bring approval and validation from others, which is so easy to get swept along with, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's really easy, I think, to lose. You know what they are, but you also can lose sight of them quite easy. It's not
Mm.
something that you always are consciously thinking about, oh, this matters to me and this matters to me today. It doesn't quite work like that, but you actually want to try and run some thoughts and decisions through those filters, actually, because otherwise,
Yes.
like you've just said, other filters might be at play that aren't as important. Things like the approval of validation of others, and it clouds our thinking.
Yeah. I think that most people who are consciously aware of the values don't go through every day checking everything they do against their list of values. Is it in alignment with one of these? No, no, we're not
Yes.
doing it. But if you are struggling with a decision, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed in trying to work out what to do or how to move forward in the best way for you, or what's not quite right in life, then actually focusing on your core values and how things are aligning with them or not aligning with them can be incredibly useful. And even if you have that well-established list of core values, it really doesn't hurt to do new identification exercises now and then, because priorities can and do change, and the context that you're working in, living in, will change. So here are getting to the actual tips, tools, and techniques part of the episode eventually. Here are two suggestions as to how to find your core values. Now, the first one is probably the most standard, the most obvious, and it's got a lot going for it because it is very straightforward and easy to do. And it's just what I call the list method. So basically, Google list of values or values words, something like that on the internet, and loads of things will come up. Pick whatever feels right for you, what you're drawn to. Print out a list of values words, then go through and highlight all those that resonate. Don't try to rationalize this. I think that's a really important point. Don't say, well, should this matter? Am I sure this matters? If you go, yeah, I think that matters, highlight it. You're done. Move on. When you've gone through and done that, you might find that you've got an awful lot of words highlighted. If you don't find that, skip the next step or two and join me when it becomes obvious that we're talking about your small list. But most people, I think, end up with a lot of words because a lot of the words will be similar because different words appeal to different people in different ways. So take a look at what you've highlighted and then group together the similar highlighted words. For instance, off the top of my head, if you've got things like exploration, adventure, novelty, they you might feel that they're actually coming from the same place. Friendship, connection, people, that sort of thing. And again, you don't have to justify why they feel that they belong together. If you feel they belong together, they have the same sense of meaning for you, that's what matters. So when you've got those groups, take a look at each group and pick a word that reflects the overall sense of that group of words. It might be one of the words you've highlighted that speaks to you the most strongly, or it might be something else that comes to mind when you actually look at all those words together. Something completely different might pop up. And once again, I'm going to keep emphasizing this. There isn't a right or wrong answer. There's only what feels right for you. And on that subject, the final point, there is no right or wrong number of values. But if you've got a list of 78 values to sort of check things against, it's probably going to get a little bit tiresome and
Yeah.
difficult to keep up with. So the advice is usually to just kind of stick to about five core values, maybe three. So take a look at your list. Maybe you've already got there, in which case, job done. You're good to go. If you haven't, see if any of them stand out. See if you can easily just go, no, it's those. Those are the ones that I want. Those are the key ones. If you can, do the prioritization exercise of, take them two at a time and go, if I had to choose just one of these to live my entire life by, which one would it be? And keep, putting them together and doing that until you're down to the list that feels right for you, whether it's three, four, five. And that's it. You've got a list of values. And when things feel uncertain and you're not sure which direction you're going in, that's an easy way of saying, well, hang on, how is this decision going to line up with these values? What is it that really matters to me here? And it can be so useful in highlighting where you're getting drawn into what other people want and expect and think about something rather than following what feels right for you.
Yeah, it feels so simple, doesn't it? But actually, I think
Mm.
it's a really helpful exercise. And I know we spoke about this in our episode all about values, which, as we said, we'll link in the show notes. But this is something that's actually quite good to revisit from time to time because your values are likely to shift, not seismically, but some
Yeah.
emphasis might be different a few years ago to perhaps where you are now. So if you've not done this for a really long time, it's definitely worth revisiting. And I
Yeah.
think that list method is a nice sort of entryway into just giving this a go. You don't have to
Yeah.
frame those words, put them anywhere, share them with anyone, do anything with them.
Mm.
It's just for you. And I think it's a useful exercise to do.
Yes, and what you said about them shifting over time or whatever, sometimes it's not necessarily the words that you would use to describe them, but your sense of what those words mean might shift.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just coming back to them now and then, it can help freshen that up and keep it feeling a little bit more alive and meaningful for you. And the second exercise, which is one that I personally really like, is one that I refer to as remember when. And it's basically about thinking of a time. It could be just the briefest of moments. It might be a particular occasion or event. It might be a longer period, but it's a time when you felt either really good in some way or really awful in some way. And the chances are that that time is going to come up for you the minute you ask yourself to do that. And again, you don't have to justify it, you don't have to explain it, you don't have to tell anyone what it is. Just you'll know when you've got the right one. And you do not have to put labels on that or explain it. You just know. Then write down everything that comes to mind for you about what made that time so great or so bloody awful. It can be the presence of something, something that was there that you enjoyed about it. It can be the absence of something or something that you felt negatively about. It doesn't matter whether you're phrasing it positively or negatively. And if you're finding it hard to do that, it can be maybe quite a hard place to start. Set a timer for maybe 5 minutes and just write a stream of consciousness about that time. Whatever is coming up in your mind, just write it down. Again, no judgment. You can shred or burn it afterwards. Nobody ever has to see it. You never have to explain it. But just write because it will help bring to the surface what's really going on for you there. And the chances are that once you've done that, you can have a much clearer sense of what it is that made that time so good or awful. So once you've finished writing all the things down that come up for you about what was good or bad about it, review that list. And this is where you start to turn any negative use of language into positives. So if, for instance, what came up for you was a really difficult time, and you may have used a word like loneliness, for instance, as what contributed to you feeling terrible, then rephrase that into what you would need in order to feel good. So it might be friendship, it might be connection, family, love, community. If you felt one of the things that contributed to you feeling great was no money worries, then what is it that you need? I mean, money is the obvious answer to that, but maybe it's a sense of security or independence rather than straightforwardly money. And to be honest, whenever money comes up, I would suggest asking what it is that the money is doing for you, because money is a means to an end. Very few people want it just to be able to sit there looking at it. You want it for the feeling it gives you, for what you can do with it. That's what you're trying to get to.
I think it's such a good exercise because it's almost like two sides of a coin. You know, you're actually seeing two different angles because yes, hopefully we can all think of a positive experience and remember the positive things, but actually looking at the negative as well and then flipping that into the positive side, you might find commonalities between those
Mm.
two experiences in the end, or they might give you slightly different shades of a similar theme. So I really like this idea of it's like different perspectives to give you a rich picture of what it is that matters, even though it probably feels a little bit uncomfortable reflecting on that negative situation. But we're trying to flip it around into what does this tell me that matters to me that I want
Yeah.
to have, because it might be something different to what you actually did have in those positive experiences, and you put them together and get that fuller picture. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it either as one or the other, whichever sort of time most strongly comes to mind, or exactly as you just said, you can actually challenge yourself to do the exercise with one good time and one bad time, and that's really interesting to see, as you say, to see how that sort
Mm.
of correlates, or perhaps not. Maybe it will show you something very interesting. So once you've gone through and got those sort of words coming up, it's about the same process as when you're just working with the lists. Go through and group those words together, get the sense of what they are, and whittle it down to a number that feels right for you. And again, it is really helpful to remind yourself of it's almost who you are, because in the sense of understanding what matters to you, there's a big sense of identity in there, I think, and of being able to forge your own path
Yeah.
rather than being dragged along somebody else's.
Yes. Against your will. Also,
Kidnapped.
I I think so. In addition to considering these values, we've got another couple of tips up our sleeves, and it probably won't surprise people. I think
Yeah.
this is going to be a recurring one for us. That
Hmm.
question. We are big fans of questions, and
Of
but actually,
course we are.
it's for good reason because it does increase our self awareness, and obviously, it's something that in a coaching session, it's based around sometimes the really simplest of questions that you don't think to ask yourself and someone else puts them to you. But because this
Yes.
is a tools, tips, and techniques episode, we have got some that we want to share with you today, which you might find interesting, particularly if you're resisting something because of what other people might think. Yeah, we've got some questions to share. I'll let you take it away, Kirsty.
Yeah, again, when you want to sort of forge your own path rather than giving in to other people's expectations and views, that those questions can make such a difference to just interrupting the subconscious responses that you've developed over time to what other people say and think and how you feel you should be. So if you are resisting trying something because you're worried about what other people might think or say, some questions to ask yourself could be, whose voice am I hearing when I'm trying to talk myself out of this? And if it's another person's voice, sometimes people very clearly hear a particular person speaking to them, then ask yourself, what would you like to say to that person? What is it that you would like them to understand about you and what you want and need? And if it's your own voice, what does that version of you need in order to feel seen and safe and loved by you? Because very often, I think people identify their own voice as coming from a younger version of themselves, an insecure version of themselves, somebody who's a child, probably. And the inner child is a good phrase for it, isn't it? That has developed, all the people pleasing tendencies in order to feel safe and loved.
Yeah, and belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. And other questions would be, what does the approval of others do for me? What is it you get from that? What's the worst that happens if others disapprove of what I do? What's the best that happens if I do what feels right for me? And whose values and beliefs am I living by? And whose do I want to live by? And what is it that actually matters to me most in this scenario? And if when you're answering those questions, you realize that you're not ready to sort of fly in the face of the disapproval of those around you or the voices in your head, that's okay. No judgment. Because if you're recognizing that what really matters to you right now is your sense of connection to those around you, your need to maintain that equilibrium and stability, that sense of security, and that's more important than the potential benefit of what you're considering trying, that is a totally valid response. That's a good outcome to understand at that time. So it isn't about trying to pressure yourself into doing something that feels scary or uncomfortable. Sometimes the outcome might be that you encourage yourself to do it, that you understand all the reasons you want to do it, and it helps you make a leap that felt difficult. And sometimes it would be a recognition that, you know what, right now isn't the time, or this isn't the right context. This is
Yeah,
not right now.
yeah, exactly that. I think it's about questions like these are just to encourage you to give some thought to these things, see how they factor in the mix. And they're not always easy to answer. We do
No.
acknowledge that. And it's not to trip you up or anything like that. It's just to give you an opportunity to think, what sense can I make of this? And actually, this is what it might mean. And you can still land back where you thought you were. We're just giving you some options to have more consideration on the table effectively to bring you
Yes,
to the conclusion that feels right for now. And that's the other thing. We spoke about this in our episode, I'm sure, on decision making. It's you're making that decision for now. It might be something that
yeah,
you revisit later.
absolutely. It's all about right now and just creating that self-awareness and a sense of acting from your choice as opposed to feeling pushed around by other people or that you have no choice.
Yeah,
There is always a
exactly.
choice, and doing nothing or staying where you are can be an active choice and a valid choice.
Yes, absolutely. And we've got one final tool, tip, technique on this episode, which is mind your language, which I love,
It's
obviously.
particularly relevant for somebody as potty mouthed as me, but no, not in that sense. This is just a recap, really, of what we said in the episode around, if it works for you, it works, is an important thing to bear in mind. But it's also important not to create a dependency on a thing that you think works for you to the exclusion of all else, because sometimes the things that help us are only helping us, they're not doing it all. And the way we think about all those things that help and support us can lead us to create a dependency on them, to see them as magic wands, to see them as things we need in order to feel a certain way or to do certain things. And there's nothing wrong with using them to help you, but it can be unhealthy to feel that you have to have them in order to help yourself. The words we use influence our thoughts, they influence our feelings, and they influence our behaviors. And if we start telling ourselves that we need a particular something in order to be able to feel a certain way, and then we'll decide that we can't feel how we want to without it. So, watch your language. I mean, the example we used in the episode was my morning coffee helps me concentrate is a perfectly reasonable thing. And if you've created a connection, once I've had my coffee, I'm going to be concentrating better, then your morning coffee will give you a nice little boost into concentrating. But if you say, I need my morning coffee to concentrate, you're eliminating any possibility of concentration unless you have the coffee.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's, it's got a
Dependency.
small difference, but
Mm,
it's critical, isn't
mm.
it? And I mean, and again, some of the things that we mentioned is potentially other people seeing it as a bit out there and not good or unhealthy or weird in some way, with things like, the oracle cards, tarot cards, that kind of thing, spirituality. So if you're saying oracle or tarot cards bring something helpful to my decision making, there's not a problem there. But if you're saying I can't make a decision without consulting the cards, then you are getting into unhealthily dependent territory.
Yeah. It's deferring the responsibility, really, isn't it?
Yes, and it's limiting, isn't it? Because you're not using other aspects of your experience and your skill set, your internal resources, your knowledge in any kind of conscious way. You're just focusing it all onto those cards, and they're only ever going to be a trigger for you finding the decision that feels good for you. That they're only a trigger into using all those things I've just mentioned. But if you start telling yourself that you have to have them, that they have the answers, that changes the relationship in an unhealthy way.
Agreed. So there you have it. We have covered our tools, tips, and techniques for this week's episode on if it works for you, it works. So just to recap, we've got the values identification with a list method or the remember when technique. We had a series of questions that you might want to ask and a little reminder just to mind your language. So I think that is everything for this week. We will be back again soon with another topic and hopefully another coaching bite size episode to follow. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of our episodes, especially if you've had a light bulb moment in answering one of the questions, have benefited from one of the tips, or have a suggestion for an episode topic.
And if these conversations have made you curious about how coaching could help you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with one or both of us to find out more about what we offer. Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.